Napoleon Bonaparte is considered to be one of history's greatest military leaders, who conquered much of Europe in the early 19th century. He became prominent during the French Revolution, from 1787 to 1799, and served as Emperor of France from 1804 to 1814, and again in 1815. We remember him today for his role in the Napoleonic Wars, and his defeat at the Battle of Waterloo on 18 June 1815. But how much do we really know about him? Here is one of the stories of Napoleon's bravery you haven't heard of: the story of Napoleon versus bunnies. Before we go into the story, let's take a brief look at some of Napoleon's military achievements. Napoleon was known to be shrewd, ambitious, and a skilled military strategist. At the age of 15, he was admitted to the elite École Militaire in Paris, and was forced to complete the 2-year course in half the time, after his father died of stomach cancer. With the passing away of his father, Napoleon was the family's chief source of income, and just after his 16th birthday, he became a commissioned officer. By 1792, Napoleon was promoted to captain in the regular army. Later, in 1796, he had helped to suppress a royalist insurrection against the revolutionary government in Paris, for which he was made the commander of the French army in Italy. In 1799, Napoleon became the first consul, and under his military leadership, he worked to establish a European empire. He centralized the government and reinstated the state religion to Roman Catholicism. He also instituted education forums and managed the creation of the Bank of France. One of his most significant accomplishments was the Napoleonic Code, which reorganized the French legal system. The Napoleonic Code continues to form the foundation of French civil law to this day. Napoleon defeated the Austrian forces at Marengo in 1800, and then negotiated a general European peace. This established French power on the continent. But the peace Napoleon had negotiated did not last long. By 1803, Britain had resumed war with France, later joined by Russia and Austria. In 1802, a constitutional amendment made Napoleon first consul for life, and 2 years later he became Emperor of France. From 1803 to 1815, France was engaged in the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon successfully waged wars against various coalitions of European nations and expanded his empire. After Britain's naval victory at Trafalgar in 1805, Napoleon left his plans to invade England, and instead he turned to the Austro-Russian forces, which he defeated at the Battle of Austerlitz later that year. This is considered to be one of his greatest victories. In the next few years, Napoleon gained much new territory, which gave him control of Europe. In the newly created territories, Napoleon installed his relatives and loyalists as leaders in Italy, Naples, Spain, and Sweden, as well as Holland and Westphalia. That was just a few of the achievements of Napoleon Bonaparte. Now it's time to share the story of one of his defeats. Napoleon's greatest and most embarrassing military defeat was not at Waterloo, but it was at the hands, or more technically, paws of a bunch of bunnies. There are a couple versions of this story, but most agree it happened in July of 1807. Napoleon had just signed the Treaty of Tilsit between France and Russia. He wanted to relax and have some good leisure time, and really celebrate this achievement. Most of the upper-class gentlemen of that time spent their pastime hunting. So Napoleon decided to celebrate with a good old-fashioned rabbit hunt. He ordered his chief of staff, Alexander Berthier, who went to work right away. Alexander Berthier set about making all the preparations, collecting the bunnies needed for such a celebration, while also arranging the outdoor meal, inviting top military generals and leaders. He wanted to impress Napoleon and all the people there by revealing hundreds of bunnies for the hunt. A perfect rabbit hunt. Everyone would enjoy the day and praise him for such good arrangements and hospitality. Some historical sources say that there were about few hundred, but others claim that at least 3,000 rabbits were collected for the hunt. There has been questions as to who really arranged the event, if it was Berthier or if he had ordered his servants to purchase the rabbits. Little did Berthier know that this day would turn out into a complete embarrassment for not just him, but especially for Napoleon. On the special day, carriages took Napoleon and his colleague to a field, where they began checking their weapons, ready for the great event. No worries, no trouble. They looked forward to a day of eating good food and hunting down some rabbits. In the meantime, Berthier and his men eagerly stood waiting behind a long row of cages holding the rabbits. As trumpets sounded, the bunnies were released and the hunt began. What do you think happened next? Napoleon tripped and fell, and the rest of the people trampled over him. Such an embarrassing day, right? Just kidding. That would have been less embarrassing. Once the rabbits were released from their cages, they did the exact opposite of what the men were prepared for. At first, the members of Napoleon's hunting party thought that all of this was quite hilarious. But as the rabbits allegedly swarmed the emperor's legs and started climbing up his jacket, the men became worried the rabbits were going to eat him alive. Napoleon started shooing them, but it was of no use. His men grabbed sticks and tried chasing the rabbits down. Napoleon's men tried for the longest time to beat the rabbits from Napoleon's body, but they were impossible to shake off. Finally, Napoleon retreated and made a run to his carriage, but the rabbits didn't stop. A historian, David Chandler, says, with a finer understanding of Napoleonic strategy than most of his generals, the rabbit horde divided into two wings and poured around the flanks of the party and headed for the imperial coach. The hundreds of bunnies continued, and some even managed to get into the carriage. The rabbits calmed down and stopped their attack only when the coach started to roll away. The man who was dominating Europe was no match for a battle with a bunch of bunnies. So what had just happened? Hunting was the popular pastime. Everyone was doing it. It wasn't supposed to be such a mess. Turns out, it was all Berthier's fault. Instead of trapping wild hares, he had purchased tame rabbits. And when the cages were open, they saw the group of men and thought it was feeding time. The rabbits all ran toward the nearest men standing there and hopped onto them, thinking they were about to be given some delicious carrots. If they were wild rabbits, they would have scattered because they fear people, and the men could have hunted them down. These cute little bunnies did what most of Europe couldn't do. They made Napoleon Bonaparte, the greatest of military leaders, turn and flee. If you liked our video, share it with your friends and family, and come to our channel for more videos like this one.